we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone for joining. Welcome to the GFI Business of Alternative Protein Monthly Seminar. I'm Molly O'Donnell, the Corporate Engagement Assistant at the Good Food Institute. Among other things, my role includes managing the business side of our GF Ideas community of entrepreneurs, investors, and other professionals in the alternative protein industry. You can visit gfi.org/community if you'd like to learn more about the community. And a little bit about the Good Food Institute. We are an international nonprofit organization that's developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. We identify the most effective solutions, mobilize resources and talent, and empower partners across the food system to make alternative proteins accessible, affordable, and delicious. You can visit gfi.org to learn more about our work. So before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. First, this seminar will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel shortly after the presentation. A copy of the slides and recording will also be emailed to all registrants after the presentation. And you can view previous Business About Protein seminars on our YouTube channel as well. Second, this presentation will include an audience Q&A in the last 15 or so minutes. Please use the Q&A box to ask questions rather than the chat. And you're welcome to ask questions throughout the seminar, but we will answer them at the end. Now I'm excited to introduce MJ Kinney, who is a former GFI food scientist and the founder of Fair Science, which is a food science consultancy focused on plant-based product formulation, process development, and ingredient sourcing. MJ is also a plant-based protein expert with XPRIZE, a foundation focused on leveraging the power of competition to catalyze innovation by incentivizing technological breakthroughs to benefit humanity. MJ will be discussing XPRIZE's newest competition, Feed the Next Billion, which is entirely focused on alternative proteins. In this presentation, MJ will walk us through the alternative protein landscape and business development opportunities, discuss the plant proteins with the greatest opportunities for local food production, and share more details on the XPRIZE competition. I'll now turn it over to you, MJ.
Great. Thank you so much, Melanie, for the introduction. And thank you everyone for being here across your many time zones. I'm based here in LA, so we got a nice 9 a.m. start to the day. I just want to say real quick that you're welcome to drop questions into the chat window. I'm not the greatest when it comes to multitasking, so I'll be leaning on Molly and her team at GFI to help me in the Q&A session to weed out some of those questions. And anyways, with all that, we can go ahead and get started on the first slide. Okay, so as Molly had kindly done already, I am here on behalf of XPRIZE as their technical operations team member focusing on plant-based protein expertise. So as a part of being inspired by both a GFI report from the Asia Pacific Crop Opportunities Report, in addition to a recent publication on our behalf for the future of a better food industry and how alternative proteins can really begin to play into that, I'm going to touch upon some plant protein insights as a very brief intro to this presentation. And then we'll segue into more about XPRIZE, the Feed the Next Billion competition, those details and ways that you can engage with XPRIZE or this competition. So some insights and opportunities. I've selected 4 plant proteins that I think will have a really big hand in the future of plant-based meat. Many of them are already currently at play, but this is really just a way to demonstrate ways that things can be improved and really identifying the high-level details that will shape those opportunities moving into the future. So I'm sure everyone on this call is probably very familiar with field peas, also known as dry yellowed field peas, which are the component for pea protein used throughout meat, egg, and dairy applications. We have a protein content for this crop between 20 and 25%, and that is at the raw inherent content, not once it's been processed into its various fractions. Now, the primary products will differ greatly by the geographical location and what that market demands. For the US market, and I should just say that XPRIZE does take a very big and global purview of things. So I apologize for only focusing on the US market at this time, but within the US market, we do have protein concentrates and isolates as the primary and leading product for field pea use. with the co-products including flour, starch, and fiber derivatives. Something I really want to bring attention to is where these ingredients are being exported and imported, because it really begins to paint a picture on how we can improve sustainability practices. So as you'll see from the top exporters and importers, there's some overlap with China. And this is a very common case for really all plant proteins, especially those in the pulse category. So with Canada, Russia, and China leading the exports, and China, India, and US leading the imports, it really paints a picture of overlap between China and mainly Canada and the US. Next slide, please. So essentially what's happening with not just yellow field peas and their use for pea protein, but other pulse proteins to come, is they are being transported from their regions of growth, in this case, Canada, up to 57% of its total pea exports, about 1.8 million tons of yellow field peas, sometimes milled, but sometimes just shipped in their raw inherent form to Hong Kong or other ports, specifically bordering China, for processing. And this happens for a couple of different reasons, some of which seem to be good reasons, but it doesn't mean that we can't be better. So for example, China has a large use for pulse ingredients for its starch derivative. So if you're in China, your primary product is actually the starch, and the pea protein that comes out of it is actually the co-product or even a waste stream previous to this new market in plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy. So for glass noodle production, pea starch, mung bean starch as well will be utilized. And once that is extracted from its protein portion and that protein portion made into a finished ingredient, it will often be shipped back to the US for applications in plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy. However, if you look at how much is actually being shipped directly from Canada to the US for manufacturing, it's only 8% of its total pea exports. So this is just one example of many ways that things can be improved and made more sustainable, because currently it does travel a round trip of about 13,000 miles from coast to coast. So mung beans, again, you'll see some overlap with China there, not a surprise. Primary products being concentrates and isolates coming online, and also a protein content between 20 to 24%. The reason why you'll see so much similarity between mung beans, by the way, and field peas is because they are both pulse ingredients or dry oil seeds. So they do require the same level of processing to an extent. And therefore, if you have one facility and infrastructure made for pea protein, it can be interchangeable with mung bean and other pulse ingredients. Oh, next slide. Thank you. Chickpeas is where it gets a little different, and I think for good reasons. So primary products for chickpeas are both the protein concentrates, since I have not yet seen in the market an isolate form reliably produced. So isolates, this is just an arbitrary call out, by the way, are 80% and above protein content on a dried matter basis, whereas concentrates will be between 40 to 60% typically. And sometimes the concentrate is typically just defatted flour. So if you have soybean and oilseed that's being processed, and once that fat is removed and it's made into a soybean flour, in some cases, depending on that protein content, it could be called a concentrate. These are just industry terms. There's nothing really set in stone or any hard rules to follow. But with chickpeas, what makes it unique is that in the process of creating that concentrate, or even with the flours that are available on the market, you have a really unique level of functionality and a really clean taste that really outcompetes both field peas and mung beans in some applications. So I'm really leaning heavily on chickpeas being a part of the future for plant-based meat. And lastly, potato. Potato brings about some really unique functional characteristics that are not seen in very many, or if any, plant proteins that are commercially available on the market, especially for products like plant-based egg, a very unique level of gelling. In some cases, having to reduce or even eliminate methylcellulose in ingredient declarations. The problem is that perhaps it's a combination of the very low inherent protein content, only 2%, in combination with limited facilities to process it into a finished ingredient. You have a very low supply available in the marketplace. Just a little like insider knowledge, potato protein is in most manufacturing settings sold out for the next 1.5 to 2 years. So if you do adopt potato protein into an application in like your future, it's just good to keep a very long-term lens of that adoption, to really plan for it, because it's not going to be anytime soon that you'll be able to reliably have it on hand. Another way to showcase how plant proteins can be improved and the opportunities that are available. If you just ignore the magenta numbers and arrows for the time being, right now when we process these ingredients, it's a very siloed system. It's very often four different facilities that will do oil extraction, flour milling, protein extraction and processing, and the starch processing. Whereas theoretically, they could very much be done within the same facility, just because there is quite a bit of overlap between the equipment that's being utilized for each of these processes. So for example, when going from a raw material, and let's just use soybeans as a good example, because they are an oil seed and they do require oil extraction. Oil seeds will be flaked, which is different than milling. They're actually flattened into something like a rolled oat, and then exposed to various processes in oil extraction. While they will produce finished ingredients as far as like an expeller pressed oil or something that has to be refined, bleached, and deodorized, it also produces a co-product, being the oil press cake. And that is very often a waste product, or at best made into a meal for animal grade food products. However, with fine milling equipment, you could also make that into a flour. And if that flour isn't good enough for human grade food purposes, you could take that flour and process it into various protein outputs, such as concentrates and isolates, and even further into native, cooked, or modified starches. A more realistic way in which you might see this play out in the next few years, or actually what is currently being done at some facilities, is they split it into two different sectors. So oil extraction and flour in one sector, protein and starch processing in another. And that's for a variety of reasons, but very much tied to the equipment that is needed and the ease of producing these ingredients. So you basically want to have something that's economically feasible, where the cost of your infrastructure is also going to allow you to produce at a max capacity. You want your output to exceed the cost of your infrastructure over a certain period of time. And so for those purposes, you'll generally see, from the point of oil extraction, oil press cakes being made into flour, and then that infrastructure stopping there, but maybe a second system of infrastructure purchasing that flour to then make it into a protein concentrate or isolate, or further finished ingredients in the starch space. So if you'd like to learn more about this, again, this is just a very brief overview. I highly recommend looking at GFI APAC's Asian Crop Opportunities Report. For every plant protein that has ever been mentioned in plant-based meat product development, I think they have a 1 to 2 page report on just that crop. It's very insightful. And if you want to know more about what an equitable food industry could look like and how alt protein can really help us get there, my white paper is also a free download. And these links, by the way, will be made available after the presentation. So about XPRIZE and the Feed the Next Billion competition, this is a multi-million-dollar competition, and XPRIZE really aims to push the limits of what's possible to solve the grandest challenges of our time. In this case, we're looking to solve this area of alt protein as it pertains to meat, and really addressing whole muscle cuts in both chicken and fish products. To date, there have been 25 years of impact, $291 million in cumulative prize purses put out by sponsors. This Feed the Next Billion is actually $15 million of that amount. $79 million has been awarded in prizes. There have been 15 awarded prizes, and there are 9 active challenges to date. And of course, none of this would be possible without our sponsors and our benefactors. Aspire is the title sponsor. They are the dedicated technology program management pillar of the Abu Dhabi government's Advanced Technology Research Council. and they are responsible for defining the Emirates research and development strategy, driving the regulation and policy. The benefactor being the Tony Robbins Foundation, a nonprofit focused on empowering individuals and organizations to make a significant difference in the quality of people who are often forgotten. So the focus here being on creating positive changes in the lives of youth, seniors, the hungry, the homeless, and the imprisoned population. The operations team includes myself, pictured there in the center, and the plant-based side. Dr. Kate Kruger is leading the cultivated sector. This would not be possible without the hard work of Caroline Colta, who is on this call. Something I did not mention in this presentation, but I'll be sure to include in the notes following it, is a link to her report, The Food Impact Roadmap, which really paved the way into this competition's existence. And Jordan Giali from LA is also joining the call today. He is the glue that makes all of our communications and this execution possible. So the winning team for this competition will focus on creating a structure, also known as a whole muscle cut, of either chicken breast or fish fillet. There's also the opportunity to develop both if a team so chooses. The important aspects of this, which will be further defined in our rules and regulations, which are upcoming, as well as our technical submission guidelines, is that this will have a nutritional equivalent story to that of its animal counterpart, in addition to a level of cookability, preparation, and versatility to its animal counterpart. There will also be a bonus prize for this competition. So as long as a team is participating in either a chicken breast or a fish fillet solution, if they also develop a whole animal origin-free growth media and at the lowest production costs, they will qualify for the bonus prize. So we get a lot of questions as to why chicken and fish. So just a high-level overview. Chicken and fish are of the most consumed ingredients in global cuisine. And in our research, we've noticed that in the regions of the world that are experiencing growth, both in terms of population, but as well as wealth, and therefore an increase in protein demand, those regions demand chicken and fish as opposed to any other animal counterpart. So we're aiming to ensure also by choosing chicken and fish that global recipes and food traditions can remain despite the inevitable changes in our food industry, and really favoring a global purview as opposed to one that's limited to just a specific geographical market. With fish, the other thing we want to acknowledge is that there are a number of research gaps, and we're really hoping that this competition will allow teams to be creative in addressing these research gaps through their solution development process. So as I mentioned, there is a $15 million prize purse. Doing some math, you're like, wait a second, 10 million, 2 million, that's only 12 million, what happened? I'll get into that in just a little bit. Your math is correct, but first place, there is a $7 million prize, second, $2 million, third place, $1 million, and the bonus prize, $2 million. There is money that's actually distributed throughout the course of the competition. There's a semifinalist stage and a finalist stage. During those stages, I believe the calculations break down to $17,000 per team for the semifinalist stage. So once you submit a technical submission and you pass into semifinals, your team would be awarded that amount of money to help with the R&D process and other expenses that are a part of that solution development process. And then in the finalist stage, teams would be awarded up to $250,000 to continue to remain in the competition. So what's next? There are a lot of next steps, and I look forward to going through those with you. Please take notes, but also be assured that all these links will be provided after the presentation. So we encourage you to, at the very least, register on POP. But if you don't yet see yourself as a part of this competition, one thing I really want to say is that we've had every person from every walk of life participate in an XPRIZE. It could be just an individual, it's been families, it's been curious students, it's been, I think, like research academics, all the way through industry and startups. So there really is no set type that applies for an XPRIZE, and I just want to make that known. So next slide, please. To date, we've actually had 140 teams register on POP, which is a prize operations platform that's across 43 countries. And if you register, by the way, if you don't mind going on to the next slide, that'll show you a screenshot of what to look for. You can go ahead to xprize.org/feed and start a team. Just for clarification, this allows registration onto POP, the prize operations platform, but it's different than completing full registration. So if you're just a curious mind that wants to learn more and be a part of this network and its communications, registering on POP is the right next step. Once you sign a competitor's agreement, in addition to paying the registration fee, then you would be officially enrolled into participating in the competition. The other thing I want to mention is that being a part of this network through POP will give you the opportunity to matchmake or learn about other teams and individuals to an extent. So perhaps you're an individual and you know that you can do one part of this overall process, but you need somebody of a unique level of expertise. You might be able to find them through POP or just come in contact with them through our organized webinars. So the lifeline of this prize is 4 years total. We launched in early December. We will be wrapping up the award ceremony and winners in Q1 of 2024. The most upcoming and pressing deadline is May 31st for technical submission and team registration. Early team registration has already ended, but no worries there. The registration fee increases slightly, but you still have until May 31st to gather up your team members and also to submit a technical submission to enroll you into the prize officially. So the technical submission will ask for things like your team's information, a bit on the demographic side, your vision, your mission and objectives, what does success look like for you? Also looking for like a bit of a layout on how you plan on approaching the solution. And we will be also wrapping in a business plan component. We encourage partnerships if they're the right fit for you. The other thing we'll be looking at, and this isn't mentioned here, is an environmental and economic level of consideration as well. All those details will be identified in the rules and regulations to come. So there's a number of reasons to compete. You can read this slide if you want to know why, if you're not yet convinced. But the thing I really want to bring attention to is funding. So obviously, XPRIZE and Feed the Next Billion, if you place as a winner in one of those 3 placings, in addition to the bonus prize, obviously that's a level of funding that could help your R&D process. But the other sources of funding I want to make known are those that are offered by GFI. So there is an annual competitive research grant program. I understand the deadline is coming up. But despite this being annual, I know that there are also ones that are on a rolling basis. And if not on a rolling basis, there's a database that you can search for through various filters and options, the right kind of research opportunity or grant for you. This is a really great tool. I'm so impressed. Also in this presentation, there will be a link to the 2-minute tutorial on how to use this tool. You might not need it. I thought I needed it and I was like, oh no, this makes so much sense. It's very easy. But I took a screenshot just to showcase how you can select alternative protein as a category within this database. And then you can turn on either of those options if you're going about it in a plant-based way, cultivated or fermentation derived. And the reason why I'm bringing attention to this fundraising aspect is, as I mentioned, there are going to be funds that are distributed during the semifinalist and finalist stages, but we do anticipate that the costs will be quite different between the plant-based and the cultivated side. So if you do plan on participating or know somebody who is participating in a cultivated capacity, it may be wise for them to seek funding from additional resources, and that is not something that we discourage whatsoever. And perhaps you don't foresee yourself being a part of the competition in the most obvious way, We also want to make partnerships known. If you or your organization could see yourself being of help to XPRIZE in this competition, we encourage you to reach out. That could be through recruitment with your audience and your network, the offering of equipment or services, especially those that will be needed highly by the participating teams in the competition. Testing partners, such as things like in sensory, environmental, economic considerations. These are all things that we're considering, and we encourage you to reach out. All right, and that is my presentation. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Again, I included those 2 reports in the case you'd like to download them. And I think we're ready for some Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, MJ. That was a super insightful presentation. And I'm so excited to see the technology that comes out of the competition. And I'm sure that the business of all protein community is really excited too, and potentially even to enter themselves. So again, now we'll turn over to an audience Q&A. So please ask questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat. And just so you know, MJ has also kindly agreed to join us in the GF Ideas community Slack after the webinar for any competition related questions that we aren't able to get through today. So if you're not in the community Slack, the invite link is in your GF Ideas welcome email, and you're also welcome to email me. You can just respond to the post webinar email that I will send out this afternoon, and I am happy to give you access to the Slack. So first question, given that GFI is also a partner for XPRIZE, we are an amplification partner, given the partnership opportunities that MJ just went over, does it make sense for XPRIZE applicants to apply for the GFI research grant program as well?
We'd like to think so, but obviously we leave that to your team to make that decision. I know that there's a lot of thought that goes into that. And oftentimes the dollars want to be awarded to somebody who might not have funding elsewhere. Something I do want to mention though, just for GFI's consideration, is that teams that are participating in XPRIZE are not guaranteed any funds. If they make it through the technical submission process into semifinalists, the $17,000 each team is so-called awarded is really for their own internal R&D. And I don't anticipate that can go very far. So that's something I'd like GFI to take into consideration, and that semifinalist stage will take until the next year.
Gotcha. Thanks, MJ. So one thing I'd like to ask is just given that the competition focuses on chicken and fish products of any alt protein production platform, one type of product that we think we're going to see a lot more of in the future is blended products, potentially, plant-based and cultivated blends, or plant-based products with a fermentation derived ingredient like Impossible's heme, for instance. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the potential of blended products and if that's something you've seen in the registration so far or expect to see.
It's something that I would definitely like to see, and I do expect to see to an extent. Not anything that we've been able to see so far. So those technical submissions are not due until May 31st. So we have some time before we actually get to see these approaches by the teams. But all of those things would be something for teams to consider, and they're not unattainable. Cultivated may very likely be, especially at a 100% basis of the matrix or of the food composition. But we're hoping that this competition will make that possible for them to be on the more affordable level. Also through very strategic partnerships, we're also hoping to reduce some of these R&D costs, if at all possible. We're thinking around that. Right now, it seems to be the case though that cultivated can kind of only ever exist as far as an economically feasible way in a blended approach. So if those options start to come online more often, that's how I foresee them being available to the consumer first. And alternatives to heme, it would be nice to see more ingredients in that space, because in the product development formulation area, very much those flavors are derived from flavor extracts, which may be natural flavor additives, sometimes through yeast extracts, and those can really only take a product so far. So if heme is truly responsible for that kind of experience we get organoleptically from the Impossible Burger and other products from their line, I would like to see ways for innovators to produce something without infringing upon those patents.
Great, thank you. So here's another question. It's a great question. Feeding the next billion is, among other things, also looking at cost and accessibility. So ideally providing sustainable, nutritious proteins for low-income consumers in resource-constrained settings. So they're wondering how the potential for impact at scale will be assessed in the competition.
Yeah, this is all going into our technical submission form as we speak. So I might not be able to say too much, but I know that we're looking at this from the lens of how can we feed, how can we actually feed the next billion? What does that look like as far as the infrastructure that's going to be required and what's currently available? There really is no easy way to judge this. I think a lot of this will come to life though once we actually see prototypes and samples from the various teams, because a lot of this doesn't really seem possible until you see it in a tangible reality. And if it's good enough and the infrastructure or other components are not yet in place, it then becomes a priority to get them into place. Unfortunately, I don't foresee us being able to really make huge strides in that in the first 4 years of the competition. Much of that change on the commercial level and adoption with various markets of the world would happen after year 4.
Gotcha, thank you. And we had another question from the chat. How are you seeing, maybe in your consultancy, the consumer response to long ingredients lists versus a sort of shorter, clean label? Do you think that there's a place for both? Are you seeing any trends in terms of consumer response?
There's definitely a place for both. It largely depends, I think, on the, knowing one's consumer and what that consumer wants. Very much the direction that my projects take are whatever it takes to make it taste equivalent to its animal counterpart. And so it's this understanding that maybe launch 1, you won't get the best ingredient declaration, but by launch 2 or 3, you might be able to get there, because everybody wants to be your friend once you can reach volume. And when you can reach volume, you can start having these unique conversations with suppliers and manufacturers to get, some unique ingredients your way. And all companies do this, I should say. They reiterate, they launch over and over again without necessarily the transparency of having a new formulation or a new tweak here and there. So it'd be great if we could have both at once, the clean and simple ingredient declaration alongside a really tasty product. It just seems to come at the cost right now of long ingredient lists in the short term until we figure out and problem solve on how to get it cleaner in the long term.
Great, thank you. So another question about the competition here. So someone is asking about sort of the participation of well-known cultivated companies that are maybe further along in their journey to commercialization. So they want to know if there are any particular considerations for early stage startups or ideation stage startups that might not be sort of that far along on kind of their path to market.
Oh, for sure, there is consideration for those teams. Again, like we've seen people from all walks of life enter into the XPRIZE ecosystem, but I don't want to say that that we would only be looking at these immediately commercialized opportunities. If there is a really good idea, a really good technology, and a team that can execute it, I highly encourage them to compete, because we will be looking at everything.
Great, thanks. And another question was wondering if, so as you kind of alluded to, Feed the Next Billion is not XPRIZE's first competition. Was wondering if you could speak a bit about previous competitions and how teams may have gone on to commercialize the technology used in the competition.
Yes, I can speak a little bit about it, but I know that there are people at XPRIZE who can speak far more strongly. I know that the Ansari Prize actually created a reusable spaceship that could be launched into space, and that technology was actually purchased by Sir Richard Branson and actually birthed that whole ecosystem into space travel. So that would be one example. Unfortunately, I don't have any images, or I didn't include that into my PowerPoint slide, but you can always learn more on the XPRIZE website on what those prizes and their outputs were.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really exciting. And I encourage folks to go through and look at previous competitions if they need some inspiration, because yeah, super, super great world changing tech. So here's another question, and I believe that you alluded to this, but maybe it's worth reiterating if there will be official guidelines released for the technical submission. Could you talk a bit about when those are coming out and kind of where to find them?
Yeah, we have, I believe it's an early April deadline that we will be getting. There might be people on this call who are mad at me for saying that. I hope they're not mad at me. No, it's just to say that technical submissions are not due until May 31st. And we need to do our job at making sure there's enough lead time when we give out these technical parameters that ultimately shape the product development process well in advance. And so I anticipate those would be released sometime in April. And also to keep track of all of these updates and when they're coming online, I highly encourage you to register on POP, which is free. And again, just keeps you in tune with all of the news and communications of that community.
Great. Thanks, MJ. Okay,
Thank you.
so looks like that is all of the questions for today. So thank you so much, MJ, for sharing your time and expertise with us. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm really excited again to see the technology that comes out of this
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It was really great to be able to present to your community, and I look forward to continuing to work together. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. And a reminder, please be on the lookout for the post-webinar email with slides, recording, and additional resources. And be sure to check out gfi.org/events to stay up to date with GFI events, as well as other sort of events of interest in the industry. And our next Business Vault Protein seminar will be on April 23rd at 12 p.m. Eastern. We'll be joined by Carrie to discuss food safety and plant-based proteins. And that's all. I look forward to seeing you all next month. Again, thank you so much, MJ, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.